What's up, party people? Welcome back. Hayden here with another video. Today I want to talk about why you're not likely to get what you want. But despair not, because I also want to talk about why that doesn't have to be true and give you some advice, tips, strategies that you can use to get more of what you want out of your life more quickly. So I think the place to start is with an understanding of why things are the way that they are right now in your life. One of the things that I know to be true about people is that we like balance, we like stability, we like consistency. So what ends up happening is we build our external reality, our life, our environments, our social circles, as a reflection of who we currently believe ourselves to be. So your external reality is reflecting your internal reality, and it creates this nice balance. It creates this nice homeostasis. An interesting counterpoint is if you've ever moved to a new city or gone away to a new country or been around a lot of people that you didn't know before, you know how uncomfortable that experience can be because you're not in your normal, usual environment. It feels a little bit unstable. It can be exciting, it can be scary, but there's no stability. And so when we look at the way in which we construct our lives, it's for consistency, it's for stability. And often what happens is the way that we've constructed our life to this point is relatively unconscious, meaning it wasn't very intentional. We grow up, we learn how the world operates as kids, we go through high school, maybe we go to college, we get a job, what have you, but we continue to craft a life unintentionally, unconsciously, meaning we're not really thinking about why am I doing this thing? Why am I taking this job? How am I getting better? How am I intentionally constructing my social circle and just being really aware of why I'm spending time with people that I'm spending time with? We don't usually do that. And so often what happens is we find ourselves unhappy. We find ourselves unfulfilled, in a career that you don't necessarily enjoy, or with a social circle that you don't really like, or just with a life generally that feels a bit unfulfilling, feels a little bit stale, feels a little bit boring. So we have this experience of unfulfillment, not being fulfilled, wanting something different, and 9 times out of 10, a lot of the time, we don't take the action necessary to create something different. And there's a reason for this. So let's say, for example, that you are in a career right now that you don't really enjoy. You don't like it. You're not super fulfilled by it. There's something else that you'd rather do. Maybe it's doing your art full time, or starting a business, or doing something very different outside the norm with your life. My assertion, or what I would guess to be true, is that there's a lot of fear that's keeping you from taking action to have things go differently. There's a lot of fear in the way. And this is the thing that keeps people from getting what they want. Hence the original title of this video, why you're not likely to get what you want. It's this fear. And specifically, I want to talk about a certain flavor of this fear that I call social cement. So again, we think about how we build our lives, we build our social circles to be a reflection of who we believe ourselves to be. And if who we currently are is not who we want to be, if we want to be somebody different, if we want to show up differently, do something different, it means that we have to change the nature of our relationships to reflect that newly updated version of ourselves. And changing relationships is very scary. It's a very scary thing because we don't know what's going to happen if we show up differently inside of a relationship. It might be that that person no longer wants to spend time with us. or that person doesn't agree, or they judge us, or they criticize us, or what have you. It's very scary to change the nature of our relationships, even if we really feel connected to and want to show up differently inside of those relationships. We want to show up as a different version of ourselves. So I call this social cement, meaning we are surrounded by all of these relationships that, in a sense, keep us stuck. They cement us where we are because of the fear of changing them. And 9 times out of 10, if we are looking at wanting something else, but having to put our relationships at risk, we will choose not to risk our relationships. And this actually makes a lot of sense. I get it. Because the underlying fear, if you change a relationship and it doesn't work out, or that person no longer wants to be around, or what have you, it's this fear that we no longer belong. It's the fear that if somebody leaves, it means that we're not worthy, we're not enough, we're not valuable, we don't belong. And that's a very core fear for every person, every human being alive, the fear of not belonging. And so even if we're doing something right now, we're in a 9-to-5, we're in a corporate job, we don't like what we're doing, we'd rather be doing something else, something more creative, something more artistic, something more entrepreneurial. Even if we really want that experience, if it's the choice seems like it's either not belonging or getting the thing that we want, we'll choose to belong. So this is why the vast majority of the time, we don't end up getting what we want. Because the change, the transformation, the shift that's required for us internally, inside of our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others, is great. It's too scary. It's too unknown. It's too unclear. So we decide to stay where we are, keep doing the same thing, keep going to the job that you don't like, stay in that relationship that's not very fulfilling, continue on in the same environments, even though it's not fulfilling, even though we don't like it. For the majority of people, this is not a conscious choice. They're not aware that that's actually what's happening, and even more importantly, they're not aware that they have a choice. They have a choice to say, even though I don't know how changing the nature of my relationships or going after this thing that I want, I don't know how it's going to change things for me. I don't know how it's going to change my relationships. I'm going to do it anyways because I trust that in pursuing this thing that's really important to me, I will either upgrade, up-level the quality of the relationships that I have with people, or I'll make new connections with people who are on board with and support that new version of myself, or I will leave behind the people who don't. That's the choice that you have when you become aware of the fact that social cement is often what keeps us stuck. This fear of change is what keeps us stuck. But if you're not aware of it, things continue on in the same. And now, because you've watched this, you don't have that option anymore. You are now in a position where you're aware of another obstacle, another roadblock that's in the way of you getting what you want, creating the life that you want. So, the opportunity. Now, some tips, strategies, tactics, things that you can actually do and start to take on to make this easier, get more of what you want more consistently and more easily. I think the first piece is becoming more aware. It's building awareness, because in any change, any kind of change that you want to create in your life, it starts with awareness, because if you're not aware of it, you can't actually change it. So this could either be a noticing practice, for example. So like over the next week, just notice where you are putting what you want on the back burner because you're afraid of how owning that you want it or speaking to it would change the nature of your relationships. That's one thing to do. Just notice that. You could also journal. Actually sitting down and looking at where am I afraid to go after what I want because of the relationships that I have in my life right now. Or if I full on pursued this thing that's calling to me, this thing that I want to go after, what am I afraid is going to happen inside of my relationships? Just become aware. of what's actually going on there. Second piece is to look at how could you practice on a low gradient, starting to change the nature of your relationships. The interesting thing about relationships is oftentimes they're predicated on history, and they have remain unchanged for a long period of time. This is especially true with childhood friends, friends from high school, friends from a while ago, what have you. We tend to meet people in a certain place in our life, and unless we're intentionally growing and transforming that relationship, it just remains the same. So looking at the relationships that you have, how can you start to introduce small changes to get used to the idea of more drastically changing the nature of that relationship? It might be doing something differently with your parents, with your friends, literally like doing a different activity. It might be bringing up a different topic of conversation that you don't normally. It might be sharing some of these interests that you have. If you want to go out and start your own business, can you just start talking about your interest in business ownership and entrepreneurship versus, hey, I'm going to go out and, now do this thing. So how can you start to introduce some things at a super low gradient to start to change the nature of those relationships? I think the third thing is to look at what's the best case scenario of you going full force into going after these things and changing the nature of the relationships. Because often what happens as people, we like to focus on fear. We like to focus on worst case scenario. So we're super focused on, here are all the things that could go wrong. Here are all the people that could hate me. Here are all the people that could leave me. Here are all the terrible things that could happen if I decide to go after this thing. But that's not likely to happen. Worst case scenario is not likely to happen. The more likely outcome is best case scenario, or even like a middle of the road kind of scenario. So part of what you might look at is, what's the best case scenario if I go after this thing? If I change the nature of my relationships, if I leave my job to start a business or pursue the arts full time or what have you, and really get clear on what that best case scenario is, both in what you would experience as an individual and in how your relationships might change as a result. Because often, especially if you identify as a people pleaser, often we feel that any change in a relationship is going to result in that person hating us and that person not liking us or leaving us or abandoning us or what have you. And in reality, if we are approaching the reinvention of that relationship from a place of vulnerability and optimism and intention, what's more likely to happen is we actually invite that person to step into a higher level of that relationship with us. Like, hey, I'm changing and I want you to come change with me. And the majority of the time, people will take you up on that. And if they don't, that's also okay. It's also perfect, because it means that they're not ready to step into that next level like you are. And it just means that if they're no longer a part of your life, they decide to no longer be a part of your life, or you decide to no longer have them be a part of your life, it just means that there's now space open for somebody even better and more aligned with who you want to become that then gets to step into that place. So those are the three pieces: becoming aware, low gradient practice, and then what was this third one that I just said? Best case scenario thinking, actually getting clear on what is the best case scenario of me going after this thing. And if you do those things, you're way more likely to get what you want and avoid the social cement. So let me know in the comments, does that resonate with you? Have you experienced this before? This social cement, fear of change, fear of changing relationships, fear of going after what you want because of how relationships might be impacted. And if so, how did it go? What did you do to move through that? Or what are you doing to move through that currently? Love to hear from you. And see you next time.